It all starts on the day the protagonist's school unexpectedly goes up in flames, but despite the chaos, he runs desperately toward the art room. If he is going to meet his end anyway, he wants it to happen in his absolute favorite place. He has already accepted that this is his final moment. He thinks everything is about to end right there, but destiny has other plans. When he wakes up and puts his hand to his head, he knows exactly where he is. It has been an entire week since he crossed over into the very painting he drew himself. He wonders with deep concern if the kids at school managed to evacuate safely. While he carries a straw basket, two incredibly long ears suddenly pop out of the bushes. The man never expected to see a three-eyed rabbit, which just makes a tiny, cute little sound. He realizes that time moves in a completely unpredictable way around here. Because of that, he cannot say exactly how long he has been living in this place. Even so, he has managed to figure out a few basic rules about how the painting works. The first rule is very simple. Absolutely everything he draws here becomes completely real. Man, that would be dangerous in my hands. I would fill my room with waifus. Right after that, the apples he just painted physically start falling right out of the canvas. If he draws a bag of salt, pans, spatulas, or flowers, it all comes to life. He is absolutely thrilled to realize he is finally free from ever spending money on food again. However, there are clear limits, since this power does not work on humans at all. Well, that ruins it. I was about to send a waifu to everyone watching this video. His attempts at drawing people only result in warm bodies that do not breathe. He feels relieved that he did not end up with some terrifying power that would ruin his simple life. The second rule is that he can interact with the outside world through the painting on the tree. Since he could step out of the artwork, he went outside and saw that 30 years had passed. While eating a piece of bread, he realizes the world has completely changed, and it is now the year of cleansing. Humans have somehow gained mysterious abilities, and these powers serve one single purpose: to fight against monsters that emerged from dungeons. And witnessing all this absolute madness without understanding a thing was our prota, who just wanted to live a quiet life painting his canvases. Lacking the courage to live in a world overrun by monsters, he decides to head right back into his painting. The third rule reveals that the forest possesses a completely unique ecosystem. Even though he only drew a single cabin and some trees, various new plants have sprouted everywhere. On top of that, every single creature living inside his artwork treats him with incredible kindness. Even the tiny birds land on his shoulder, singing happily. He wonders if it is because he created the place, but concludes it makes sense that the beings from his art would be friendly toward their creator. The fourth rule appears along with our beloved system, which is detailing the properties of the fruit he just picked. The young man jumps a little and wishes these screens would give a warning before popping up. He knows these screens appear to the awakened ones, known as hunters, after the cataclysm. The youth finds it absolutely fascinating that he has become one of these awakened ones, just like in a game. His specific painting feels like a cozy, relaxing game about gathering ingredients and cooking. He does not know if he will ever use it, but he plans to try crafting some medicine with what he gathered today. Thinking about his new life without a standard job, he clicks to discover the new content. He has never been happier just eating and sleeping without the crushing pressure of a regular job. He decides that today's lunch will be honey-glazed sweet potatoes, since nothing ever spoils inside the cabin. With a pantry that stays forever full, his daily routine is now focused entirely on his meals. Now that is the life, just eating and sleeping. This is a level of peace he could never have enjoyed back when he worked as a teacher. He looks at the painting on the tree and realizes just how much he truly loves this new reality. Suddenly, the man hears a strange noise coming directly from the entrance of the painting. He locks his attention onto the golden frame hanging on the trunk of the tree, and the final rule is finally revealed. As wild as it might sound, the prota has actually become the painting itself. His physical body has merged with the art, making him a permanent resident of that world. Suddenly, the man starts to open his eyes slowly as he senses a change outside. A mysterious dark smoke begins to pour rapidly from inside Gio's portrait. The dark energy spreads through the destroyed room with incredible force and intensity. The young man lets out a sigh of relief as he manages to materialize back into the real world. He peers down the dark, silent hallway of the school with a lot of suspicion. The youth wonders if the noise he heard earlier was just some wild animal passing by. Right after that, the dark smoke rushes back inside the golden frame. Back inside the painting, Gio walks along, humming a tune with his basket full of delicious things. He loved that untouched sanctuary, where he could cook amazing dishes every single day. The young man spent all his time enjoying the wonderful meals he prepared himself. Life there was so good that he would not mind if he never stepped out of the frame again. In the real world, a few explorers find the portrait and are stunned that it survived the fire. They analyze the painting up close and notice the artwork is completely flawless and even has a title, Reading the title, Portrait of Gio, they praise their companion who possesses the appraisal skill. They deduce that the painting is a special item since it is the only clean thing in that abandoned school. The men are absolutely certain that the mysterious object came directly from some dungeon. They decide to wrap the painting up quickly, knowing that collectors are going to lose their minds over it. One of the hunters celebrates eagerly, thinking about the massive amount of money they are about to make. While this happens on the outside, Gio keeps sleeping peacefully inside the canvas. Due to the movement, the painting's connection windows begin to shift scenery all on their own. Suddenly, the view at the entrance of the painting transforms into a luxurious theater packed with people. A bright spotlight shines directly onto the portrait, which has been placed up on a pedestal. The entire audience in the auction hall observes the piece of art with a lot of curiosity. After a massive bid at the auction, the painting ends up being taken to a collector's private gallery. The vault where the artworks are kept is protected by heavy chains and powerful magic runes. A man wearing a white trench coat walks down the luxurious hallway carrying Gio's painting. On his way, he passes by several other strange and cursed artifacts that he owns. The collector enters an immense glowing hall to place his newest piece on display. Sporting some very flashy gold rings, he reaches out his hand to position Gio's portrait. With great care, he hangs the painting on the main wall of his private gallery. Bisabayol, the guildmaster of the collectors and an S-rank hunter, thinks the artwork is magnificent. A bit earlier, the guildmaster had been called over by one of his subordinates. The assistant questions if they might be going a bit too far with this obsessive hunt for items. Bisabayol fires back, asking if he is seriously telling a collector not to collect things. The man states that he finds that kind of comment from his assistant to be a massive insult. The assistant complains about the fortune spent on the painting, but he replies that he buys whatever he wants with his own money. Bisabayol reveals proudly that even the president of the Hunter Association wanted that specific piece. All of this is directly connected to the terrible cataclysm that devastated the world 30 years ago. Multiple dimensions collided with Earth, creating dungeons from which divine monsters emerged. The entirety of humanity was left in ruins as it tried to survive the chaos of that invasion. However, an incredible person appeared, created the system, and saved humanity from going extinct. This legendary figure of extreme power is the current president of the association, Dan Hyra. Even with no interest in collections, she offered an absurd amount at the auction for that portrait. The assistant with glasses is completely shocked to find out about the president's massive interest in the artwork. The strange thing is, even with it being so valuable, the master cannot see any information from the canvas. The subordinate bows and apologizes for judging the portrait without knowing its true worth. The guildmaster confesses in a mysterious tone that not even he knows what that portrait actually is. The subordinate is completely left in disbelief, questioning what kind of nonsense that is. The assistant reminds him that the leader became an S-rank hunter using nothing but his appraisal skill. The sidekick is stunned to notice that the boss of one of the 3 largest guilds in the country cannot appraise the piece. The young man breaks into a cold sweat, imagining what could happen to the world if an item like this exists. The leader jokes that flattery will get him nowhere, but the assistant says that is not what he is doing. With a very sinister smile on his lips, the master agrees that the artwork is more dangerous than anything else. He confesses with a lot of enthusiasm that this was exactly why he wanted the canvas even more. The collector looks at the drawing up close and wonders who the person portrayed there could be. The man thinks that, whether it is a human ability or not, the perfection of that artwork is truly incredible. The man feels such a unique vibration in the drawing that it almost feels as if a living person were trapped inside. The man focuses his sharp feline gaze very closely, trying to spot some hidden secret on the canvas. He finds himself pulled into a strange vision and wonders what that total darkness could be. In the middle of that pitch blackness, 2 massive glowing yellow eyes appear right before him. The vision shifts to a deep, colorful backdrop that looks a lot like the cosmos itself. Suddenly, all that flowing, mysterious energy from the painting begins to settle down completely. The collector starts celebrating with absolute joy over owning a piece that not even his eyes could appraise. With a wide grin on his face, he states he is certain that this is no ordinary painting. Meanwhile, Gio watches in shock from the inside as the new owner of the painting laughs out loud on the outside. The young master of the painting is completely terrified to hear that insane laughter. He confesses to himself that he never thought he would feel his life was in danger inside his peaceful cabin. Gio knew the outside view had been changing, but he never imagined someone would actually speak to him. The collector taps on the frame and asks in a playful way if the teacher can hear him. Feeling an extremely bizarre vibe, the youth shuts down any chance of responding to the man. He realized his painting is now inside a very fancy building that looks like a gallery. The young man gets worried upon realizing that this frame is still his one and only way in and out. Gio imagines with absolute dread that if he decides to step out and see the world, he might get arrested for trespassing. He fears that society might decide to burn him at the stake, thinking he is a portrait that summons entities. On the outside, the man wonders if he was rude and deduces that the being in the painting does not want to talk just yet. With a cheerful wave, the collector promises he will be back to visit him the next day. Hearing that the strange man intends to return, Gio panics underneath his tree. Despite the issues, Gio's next day starts off with a very tasty breakfast. He decides to take advantage of the fact that the gathered flowers and fruits dried well to prepare some tea for dessert. The young man carefully organizes the dried herbs and petals into clean wooden boxes. It is at this exact moment that he realizes a very important detail. He does not have a tea set without panicking over it. He simply positions himself calmly in front of his drawing canvas. As he paints a beautiful white porcelain teapot, the object quickly begins to materialize in the real world. Gio hugs the newly created teapot affectionately, feeling very satisfied with his skill. With smooth movements, the youth begins to pour the hot water into the teacup on the table. He closes his eyes peacefully to savor the very first sip of that relaxing drink. Seeing the blue liquid glowing in the cup, he praises the wonderful flavor he managed to create. A system window notifies him that he has just prepared a medicinal tea using the art of alchemy. He reads about the effects on immunity, but he knows there is no way to test these improvements on his own body. The reason for this is that since he entered the painting, he no longer has basic physical needs. Even though he can still move around, eat, and sleep perfectly in that wonderful place, the young man has never felt hot or cold again in his life, which means he has also never sweat again. He also notices with a lot of amusement that he has absolutely no need to use the bathroom anymore. The youth marvels at the idea of having become a highly evolved living being after entering the frame. He celebrates no longer having to clean bathrooms, but he knows the real problem lies elsewhere. This massive problem resurfaces when the voice of that inconvenient man echoes once again, calling out to him. Gio lets out a long, tired sigh dealing with that entire uncomfortable situation with the collector. It has already been 11 days that the guild president has been trying to make conversation with the painting, getting zero response. The interloper says he is disappointed and asks if he does not feel lonely, but the youth denies it in his thoughts. Although the system shows that the man is perfectly safe and friendly, Gio prefers not to take any chances. The collector complains that the portrait's silence makes him very anxious for a good conversation. He then points to a person tied up on the floor and asks if the painting did not like the offering. The man explains calmly that the most common offerings are usually flawless people or sinners. He offers to bring any sinner that Gio wants and asks him to name his conditions. Hearing that bizarre proposal of human sacrifice, Gio feels an enormous weight on his back. He fears things will spin completely out of control and listens to the man trying to speak in 27 languages. The youth tries to drink his delicious tea but feels like he is going to choke from all the stress. From the conversations of the employees, Gio discovers that this man commands one of the biggest groups in the country. The president asks with a smile if the being in the painting truly does not want to talk to him. Gio's portrait remains completely silent, showing absolutely no reaction whatsoever. The man with two-toned hair finally gives up for the day, saying goodbye until the next opportunity. The collector walks away and exits the luxurious exhibition hall, walking in a very relaxed manner. The young man concludes that he senses no malice in the man and admits he does not exactly dislike him. Even so, being extremely introverted, he feels utterly exhausted by all that persistence. He hopes the intruder's enthusiasm will run out soon and that he will give up trying to speak to the painting. Decided to clear his head, the youth places a large bag of flour onto his kitchen counter. He thinks that if the man keeps making small talk for too long, maybe it would be better to try talking back. After all, it would be a massive problem if the collector decided to burn the painting due to a lack of response. Gio mixes the dough while pondering what would happen to his world if the painting were destroyed. While staring at the fireplace, the youth confesses to himself that he has no desire to be burned alive anytime soon. He concludes that he needs to come up with an efficient plan to reclaim his only entrance and exit. While the sand in the hourglass falls inside the cabin, the gallery elevator arrives at the 5th basement level. A female employee in a black suit and glasses steps out of the elevator carrying a clipboard in her hands. She does her late-night rounds, confirming that the room's temperature and humidity are ideal. Finally, the young woman walks through the dark hall to check on the current state of Gio's portrait. Focusing her light on the golden frame, she sees nothing but the drawing of a beautiful cabin in the forest. The secretary is utterly shocked because she was absolutely certain the artwork was a human portrait. Suddenly, she feels an incredibly strong and terrifying chill creep slowly up her spine. The employee turns her face slowly, her eyes wide with sudden fear. She realizes that the entire massive art gallery hall is completely dark and silent. At that exact moment, a mysterious voice echoes from the shadows, giving a calm and unexpected greeting. A hooded silhouette appears, offering a hot tea and asking if she would like to chat. Overcome by absolute panic, the young woman drops her clipboard and her pen straight onto the floor. Far away from there, the Collectors Guild continues to be recognized as one of the largest in the country. Their art gallery is restricted exclusively to the leader, licensed curators, and authorized buyers. A hunter with gray hair and a dark trench coat walks down the massive hallway with his briefcase. He approaches the main elevator to head down to the restricted area in the building's basements. The hunter presses the down button while thinking about the recent rumors regarding a supposed ghost. He finds another employee in the hallway to get a better understanding of the situation on that floor. The colleague hands him a coffee and says that the 5th basement level has had 17 complaints in 2 weeks. They know the leader collects everything he finds beautiful, even if the object is actually a monster. Because of this habit, most of the haunting issues in the facility were caused by monsters. The man with gray hair finds it strange that the experienced curators have complained quite that much. The responsible department buried the rumors, but the hunter knows you cannot hide something like this forever. He takes a sip of his hot coffee and mutters that this troublesome situation is going to give him a lot of work. Despite complaining about the duty, he holds the cup and concludes that this type of problem is already familiar to him. The A-rank hunter Yu Sung-woon, who works as a curator for the guild, asks what needs to be done. The employee with glasses looks highly relieved and praises his companion's reliability immensely. He suggests that his colleague take over the role of administrative manager, but the hunter politely declines. The young man recalls that Sung-woon used to work as the research team leader at the association. The hunter reveals that he received many disappointed and harsh looks when he decided to leave his old position. He confesses that he does not want to draw attention, and his companion agrees not to push the matter. They comment that bad rumors about the gallery need to be avoided and that they plan to act quickly. The assistant hands over the witness data and says he plans to train the staff very soon. The reports detail that the mysterious apparition has very fair skin, dark hair, and wears a cloak. The document even includes a sketch of Gio's face, indicating that he is considered very handsome. The notes reveal that it is difficult to make direct eye contact and that the being makes no sound when walking. Sung-woon finds it intriguing that the accounts are consistent and that the ghost does not try to hide. The assistant nods his head while the hunter reflects on the curious details of the case. He finds it very strange that despite so many prominent appearances, no human has been left harmed. He recalls that all monsters coming from dungeons have always displayed hostility without exception. The hunter thinks that if a tame beast existed, it would become a headline across the entire world. He knows the association would lock him up for research before the public even found out about his existence. On top of that, Sung-woon points to the report and asks about the strange habit of giving gifts. The colleague explains that the being always tries to initiate a normal conversation, just like an ordinary human. The youth theorizes that the ghost might actually think he is human, introducing himself simply as Gio. The conversation continues smoothly, even if the employee is too terrified to look at him. The dialogues always revolve around everyday topics. Without any personal or invasive questions, he discovers that the items the being hands over at the end of a good conversation are quite peculiar. Reading the description of the gifts given by the ghost in the report, the hunter is highly surprised. The employee with glasses observes Sung-woon's stunned reaction with a lot of seriousness. The gifts were just ordinary treats and common sweets, which leaves the hunter quite confused. He asks if the guild ever conducted a laboratory analysis on the food components. The colleague reveals that Master Bisabiol brought in prisoners to test the effects of the food. Sung-woon asks curiously if the food was poisoned in some way to harm the test subjects. The assistant reveals that quite the contrary. The food items worked as excellent medicine. The revelation that the sweets cured people leaves the white-haired hunter completely jaw-dropped. The food items had perfect medicinal effects tailored to the health issues of whoever received them. Sung-woon reflects that the more he hears about the ghost, the more problematic he seems. The being can read the health conditions of humans and create beneficial magical items with ease. He does all of this while hiding perfectly inside the gallery's maximum security. With such complex abilities, Sung-woon deduces that this being's power level must be incredibly high. He vents, saying that it would be much easier to handle the situation if the ghost were aggressive. The hunter recalls that the apparent goodwill of dungeon civilizations is usually terrifying. This makes Sung-woon remember a major political incident that occurred 11 years ago. Back then, the delegation sent to make contact with a new dimension returned completely deformed. The alien civilization altered the diplomats' bodies because they deemed them inefficient. After that tragedy, all dungeon beings were labeled once and for all as mortal enemies. Sung-woon decides to handle the case personally, stating that he is an expert on the matter. The employee thanks him for the support, and the hunter replies that it is simply his professional duty. Before Sung-woon steps into the elevator, the assistant says he needs to share one more detail. He reveals that the last piece of important information has to do with the very beginning of all the trouble. It all started at the exact moment the master put Gio's portrait on display in the 5th basement level. The elevator doors close, and the hunter in the dark trench coat goes down alone. Lost in thought, he remembers the sly smile on Master Bisabale's face when he ordered him to take on this new task. The guildmaster loved showing off his new artifacts and giving difficult orders to his curator. Master Bisabale smiles from ear to ear and tells Sung-woon to take over the new job for good. He raises a glass of wine and warns in an intimidating way that the task is to look after Gio's portrait. The assistant with glasses just closes his eyes and smiles, feeling a bit bad for his colleague. The elevator doors close, revealing the tense and worried face of the A-rank hunter. He goes down alone in the elevator holding his briefcase, focused on starting the dangerous mission. The hunter keeps the lollipop in his mouth and concludes that this was not just another extra task. Biting down hard on the candy, he is absolutely certain he will have to pull a lot of overtime on this case. Yu Sung-woon fixes his white hair while walking down the hallway on maximum alert. He pulls his phone out of his pocket to check that the clock already reads 4:29. The young man stares intently at the darkness of the art hall and notices that the target is right ahead. He notes that the barefoot figure wearing a dark cloak matches the report's description perfectly. The hunter peers from behind a pillar, knowing that the mysterious being only appears before dawn. He wonders if the ghost cares about witnesses or if he needs rules to act. Sung-woon hides and deduces that being a humanoid, the creature must be quite clever. He considers himself very lucky to manage to observe the target on his very first watch. He activates his sound amplification skill to the maximum to try and catch any noise. The hunter deduces that the other employees did not have such advanced auditory skills. With his power activated, he hears a very soft sound that resembles blades of grass brushing against each other. He finds that noise incredibly light for a creature of such an imposing physical size. The young man narrows his gaze in the dim light to decipher the attitude of that mysterious being. Focusing his vision, he notices with surprise that the creature is merely observing one of the canvases. The hunter notes that the being does not touch the dangerous artifacts, acting in a very smart manner. The man in the black cloak walks slowly, seeming only interested in appreciating the art. Sung-woon wonders if he has an aesthetic interest or if he is looking for a specific item. For a brief instant, the target's hood reveals the very calm and handsome face of young Gio. The hunter gets a terrible fright when the creature suddenly spins around in his direction. The gazes of the two end up locking directly and terrifyingly in the middle of the dark hall, and Sung-woon's eyes, Gio's figure takes on a shadowy and immensely powerful appearance. The hunter takes a step back immediately, feeling his whole body tremble with fear from the energy. He panics upon seeing a gigantic purple magic circle manifesting right in front of him. The young man stares at that dark yet glowing energy, completely unable to move. In the center of that endless black spiral, he senses the presence of something colossal. Staring into the red eyes in the darkness, he feels an inexplicable, reverent dread. Sung-woon extends a trembling hand, completely panicked by the scale of such massive power. However, in a fraction of a second, the black-cloaked creature vanishes without a trace. The elite hunter drops to his knees on the floor, breaking into a cold sweat with his breathing completely out of control. Regaining his strength, he stands up quickly and grips his briefcase tightly in his hands. In a panic, he begins running desperately away from that exhibition hall. The hunter flies past Gio's golden frame, wanting nothing more than to escape from there as fast as possible. The youth's portrait remains hanging on the wall, peaceful as if nothing had happened. Sung-woon notices with shock that the monster managed to hide back inside the artwork. He becomes very worried about the possibility of having accidentally provoked that creature. With that, the first day of investigations regarding Gio's portrait comes to an end. Inside the frame, Gio collapses to his knees on the grass and complains about the massive scare he just had. The young man is confused, trying to understand why the hunter was hiding behind the vase. He reflects on it further and begins to consider if the intruder hid simply because he was afraid of him. Gio remembers that all the gallery staff always ran away desperately upon spotting him. The young man looks at the painting on the tree and notes with relief that the hunter has already left. To avoid further trouble, he decides to practice meditation to look just like an ordinary portrait. While he meditates on the grass, the three-eyed rabbit approaches and climbs into his lap affectionately. Gio thinks that either way, that hunter is still going to end up coming back here. He just has this gut feeling while trying to get close to one of the animals. Gio laments that the animals will come close, but they always run away when he tries to touch them. He thinks about how nice it would be to have a pet that he could hug whenever he wanted. Suddenly, the young man's eyes light up as a new idea comes to him. He looks toward a blank canvas resting on his easel. The investigation into Gio's portrait enters its second day. Yu Sung-woon lets out a sigh of surprise as he approaches the painting. The hunter stares in silence at Gio's portrait, which is back hanging on the wall. He is relieved that Gio did not hide away completely and decides to begin the real work. The hunter knows that what happened the day before proved that this portrait is no ordinary monster. From now on, Sung-woon needs to figure out and follow the rules of that peculiar painting. His goal is to find out what that creature is, and if it can coexist with humans. He confesses to himself that staring into those eyes directly drains all of his strength. There are monsters that emerged in the Great Cataclysm that can only be fought if their lore is understood. Since attempts usually fail at first, humanity needs to study these beings to survive. Suddenly, Gio's painting asks if the hunter would like to have a chat with him. With a friendly smile, Sung-woon responds that he would love to chat with the youth in the painting. This diplomatic approach was one of the ways humanity used to survive on Earth. Gio becomes extremely moved and thinks that this hunter is a very kind person. He recalls that although they both startled each other during their first meeting, the man remained calm. Gio admires the fact that the hunter shows no fear whatsoever, even in front of a talking painting. The hunter apologizes for the previous day, which makes Gio consider him an exemplary citizen. Gio ponders that in a world full of giant monsters, a talking painting is actually somewhat normal. The young man says there is no need to apologize, and Sung-woon thanks him for the consideration. Next, Gio directly asks what the hunter's name is. Sung-woon wonders if the conversation started following the exact same pattern as the previous 17 people. The hunter reflects that names are the most crucial part of a contract that binds souls. He knows the risk of a forced contract, but doubts the painting will do anything bad just by knowing his name. The hunter introduces himself formally, saying his name is Yu Sung-woon. Gio repeats his name and comments that the hunter seems to have a lot of questions to ask him. Sung-woon confirms that he has many doubts and mentions the eye contact made the day before. The hunter asks directly if it was really Gio who was observing him in the hall. Gio confirms without hesitation, leaving the hunter surprised by such absolute honesty. Sung-woon asks if the youth can step out of the painting, and Gio replies that he can. The young man in the painting maintains a calm and peaceful expression. While answering the doubts, Gio notices the hunter's nervousness, who realizes with embarrassment that he made his reaction way too obvious. Sung-woon admits he was surprised that a non-human entity would reveal information so easily. Gio responds that he had no reason to hide anything, simply because the hunter asked the hunter, then questions what would have happened if he had asked with bad intentions. The answer that comes from the frame is direct, stating that such a thing would be a major lie. Gio explains that he spoke to Sung-woon because he is a good and kind person, asking if that is enough. The hunter swallows hard upon realizing the creature can tell good from evil in people. He wonders what would happen if the painting stood in front of someone it considered bad. The youth in the painting takes the moment to ask if the hunter has any more questions, regaining his composure. Sung-woon quickly confirms that he still has questions to ask. He asks if the ghost handing out delicious treats around the gallery is Gio himself. The hunter finds the youth's sudden delay in answering this simple question rather strange. He becomes pensive, not knowing if Gio took offense or did not like being called a ghost. Fearing he ruined the mood, the hunter apologizes right after, just in case he offended Gio. Gio gets discouraged, remembering everyone fled from him out of fear, but says he understands, since a talking portrait really does seem haunted by a ghost. However, the young man prepares to make a very important revelation to the hunter. Gio reveals directly that contrary to what people think about ghosts, he has never met his end in life. The hunter wonders if he was born as a portrait, and then questions for what reason he kept roaming the gallery. Gio explains he was just curious about the place, since he suddenly turned into a painting and was brought there. The youth in the painting confesses that the rare artworks on display in the gallery caught his attention quite a bit. He also had a lot of curiosity to know who the people working there were, and what their lives were like. Gio wanted to find out everyone's names and tastes, even with the world having changed so much. He says that anyone living alone naturally looks for someone to talk to, since a social life is necessary and he does not want to be burned. Sung-woon finds it intriguing that this interest in the human lifestyle is shown with such a dry tone of voice. Reminiscent of other monsters, Gio adds that this interest increases even more when dealing with someone polite like the hunter. With a smile, Sung-woon comments that the youth in the painting apparently likes people who are polite. Gio says he found the employees better to talk to than the red boss, and Sung-woon deduces he is talking about Bisabiol. The youth in the painting explains in a simple manner that the guildmaster talks way too much for his taste. He adds that Bisabiol talks so much that it becomes difficult to even get an answer. Sung-woon tries to hold back a laugh upon realizing his boss managed to land on the talking painting's blacklist. The hunter understands why Bisabiol had no information on the painting. Since Gio found him rude and refused to talk to him, Sung-woon apologizes for his boss's eccentricity, but Gio says it is no problem, since he did not seem like a bad man. The hunter notices that Gio is not hostile even toward those who lack manners, as long as they are not evil. Acting calmly in front of an S-rank hunter, Sung-woon observes the painting seriously and wonders who or what exactly this young man is. Gio breaks the gallery's silence and asks if the hunter has any more questions to clear up. The hunter asks if Gio can see the outside even when the portrait appears to have its eyes closed. He questions if the youth was watching them the whole time from there and tries to understand his reason for wanting to talk so much. Gio responds that he only looked because the scenery moved, like the window of a bus on the way to Seoul during a holiday. He explains that the painting only opens its eyes when it wants to communicate, something he discovered using a mirror in the burned school. Other than that, the painting always remains with its eyes closed, allowing him to just observe the outside in total safety. Gio adds that since he is trapped inside a frame, things work a bit differently. He confesses he has no other choice but to watch the outside world, finding the moving images quite interesting. The hunter swallows hard and merely responds with few words, digesting that deep explanation. He realizes that, to Gio, the true painting on display is not the canvas, but rather the humans themselves on the outside, lightening the mood. Sung-woon comments that Gio's direct tone of voice caught him by surprise. The youth in the painting responds that he was just following proper etiquette, leaving the hunter reflective. Gio questions if, as a human being, it would not be natural and correct to maintain good etiquette in social interactions. With a calm look, the hunter concludes that this conversation with the entity was extremely pleasant. And so, the second day of investigation regarding Gio's portrait comes to its official end. The phone screen marks exactly 9 o'clock in the morning the next day. The office door is suddenly thrown open, with a warning shouted to the guildmaster inside the room. Bisabiol ignores the uproar and continues calmly savoring his hot tea. The guildmaster smiles peacefully and asks what exactly could be that dangerous. Sung-woon enters the room in a hurry and warns that the danger has to do with the portrait under their custody. The hunter explains that this creature is entirely different from other known monsters that suffocated people with fake kindness. He highlights that the most important and unusual detail of all is that the being considers himself a legitimate human. The hunter says he does not know if Gio truly believes it or is just trying, but warns that these cases seem safe at first glance. He adds that if something goes wrong with an entity of this type, the outcome will be catastrophic. The hunter warns that the painting judges good and evil by its own rules, and fears how it would react to someone it deemed bad. Sung-woon asks if the boss considered sending the painting to the association, but gives up. Already knowing the negative answer, Bisabiol finds the creature very docile based on the descriptions and asks Sung-woon to keep talking until he can introduce them. The guildmaster emphasizes that it would be a shame to be ignored again, so he orders the hunter to find out Gio's tastes. Feeling a bit awkward, Sung-woon accepts the personal request, remembering that this is already his job anyway. Bisabiol finds his employee's cynicism amusing, and the hunter responds that this happens because he only hires people like that. The collecting habit of the master of the Collectors Guild was not limited to rustic objects, as he handpicked every single one of his employees himself. Bisabiol did not hire just anyone, which is why it is impressive how Gio manages to pressure such strong people with nothing but his presence. This only serves to show the immensely powerful caliber of that mysterious creature's soul. The hunter warns that he will make regular reports, but says it is difficult to discover the painting's true nature in a few days without parameters. Wondering if his boss wants to destroy the world, Sung-woon says goodbye when Bisabiol merely says he can leave now. With that, the third day of exploring Gio's portrait officially begins at the gallery. Sitting on a simple chair in front of Gio's painting, Sung-woon starts the dialogue by asking if he does not feel lonely. The youth in the painting responds directly that he does not usually feel alone in there. The hunter smiles faintly and apologizes, in case that was too intrusive of a question, since only employees look after the artworks. Sung-woon assumed Gio stepped out of the painting motivated by loneliness to walk around the gallery. Gio states he likes places without people, causing the hunter to ask if he feels uncomfortable with the conversation. Gio denies it and shares that he talked so much in the past that he always wished for a future where he did not have to say a single word. He reveals he always sought a place where he did not have to talk too much with other people, a calm place in which he was not trapped or bound in any way to daily obligations, and where he also did not need to care or worry excessively about things around him. The youth in the painting confesses he always wanted a place like that, and that this painting meets his desire perfectly. After listening to the account in silence for a moment, Sung-woon asks if the young man was truly a human being in the past. Gio assures him he is still human, which makes the hunter wave his hands quickly and apologize for the way he spoke. The hunter explains he wanted to know if he was a regular human who was not trapped in a painting, and Gio confirms it. Given this, Sung-woon reflects that humanoid monsters are usually split into two major categories. The first category includes those who were born as monsters but evolved to take on a human appearance. The second category houses those who started life as humans but turned into monsters at some point. The hunter concludes that Gio belongs to the second group, and for that reason still considers himself a legitimate human being. To him, this makes him fascinating, since monsters with human memories are usually consumed by negative feelings. However, the youth in the painting seems to be in an incredibly deep and peaceful state of calm. Yet, the hunter notices that this stillness is not pleasant, almost reminiscent of the melancholy vibe of a funeral. Staring at the youth in the frame, Sung-woon feels a chill thinking that Gio looks like the very representation of finality. The hunter changes the subject and asks if Gio does not get bored, and the youth admits that sometimes he does, making him ask how he has fun. Gio responds that he usually has a meal, leaving Sung-woon highly surprised as he wonders if a painting can actually eat. Gio states calmly that he likes eating very much, keeping the hunter in shock with the unusual revelation. The hunter thinks Gio does not look like someone who likes to eat and silently prays that his food is not human flesh. Sung-woon apologizes for the potential rudeness and asks directly in what manner the young man manages to eat. The youth explains that he usually cooks himself after thinking about the dish he is in the mood to eat at the moment. The youth in the painting gathers all the necessary ingredients for the recipe and does all the preparation with care. After that, he uses his own kitchen utensils to prepare the food and finish the dish. Gio concludes by saying he is just a regular human and finds the hunter's curiosity about how he eats very strange. Sung-woon falls silent, wondering if the young man notices that giving this detailed explanation makes him seem even less human. Gio seems to understand the hunter's point of view as he observes his reaction from the other side of the canvas. The hunter recalls the first rule of that painting, in which everything Gio draws becomes completely real. Gio notices the young man's interest and wonders if he is curious to know what else can be done in the painting's dimension. The youth says he understands and reveals he was also curious to discover the limits of what is possible to create within that world. Gio looks at a quick sketch drawn on his easel and makes a decision about his next step. Gio thinks about asking for the hunter's help to run a test, saying there are ways to have fun precisely because he is in the frame. Gio explains that this requires a bit of help, which leaves the hunter curious to understand how the process works. The youth in the painting invites the hunter to join in, saying he can also provide him with a bit of fun. Sung-woon tenses up and quickly asks what kind of fun the mysterious youth is referring to. To the hunter's surprise, Gio simply asks him to draw an apple on the canvas of his portrait, confused. The hunter asks if he should really draw over the painting, and Gio confirms it, saying it is not hard. Holding the brush, Sung-woon hesitates because he does not feel at all comfortable altering such a perfect masterpiece. Gio just lets out a sound of surprise upon seeing the hunter pull painting materials out of his briefcase and asks if he always carries them. The hunter explains that he tries to carry various useful items whenever possible, since you never know what might happen in the gallery. He adds that because of this, the best thing to do is always to be well prepared for any type of situation. Sung-woon thinks about the current moment, questioning what would have happened had he not had the painting materials with him now. The drawing of the red apple on the canvas turns out very simple, made with quick strokes and without much refinement. Feeling somewhat embarrassed, the hunter admits that it did not turn out to be a very pretty apple. Geo thanks the hunter while his hand reaches out from inside the painting to grab the drawn apple. Sung-woon is left in shock and lets out a sound of extreme surprise upon witnessing that unbelievable scene. Right before the hunter's eyes, Geo takes a bite of the drawn apple and begins chewing with relish. The hunter widens his eyes, unable to believe what he is witnessing right in front of him. Sung-woon notes in his mind, completely perplexed, that the youth actually ate the drawing. The hunter trembles with shock, processing the fact that the creature just ate the apple he literally just drew. He stutters mentally before the mystery, feeling his heart race with the revelation of that phenomenon. He confesses to himself that never in his entire life has he witnessed anything like what he just saw. Inside the frame, Geo praises the flavor, saying it is delicious, perfectly ripe, and has a wonderful aroma. The hunter stares at his brush in confusion, unable to understand how a scribble made with cheap paint could gain real flavor and aroma. Geo explains that being in a painting, he can accomplish many different things from his canvas. The youth reveals that on days when he is too lazy to cook, he just draws a ready-made meal to eat. The hunter swallows hard, knowing full well that an ordinary human would never be capable of such a feat. With great calm, Geo asks the hunter if he finds all of that very fascinating to watch. After Sung-woon's confirmation, Geo says he understands and decides to return the favor for the apple drawing. The hunter is intrigued by the promise of a reward and wonders what would come next. Geo thinks the hunter is very kind for having cooperated willingly with the unusual request to draw the apple. He recalls that after opening his eyes in the painting, he began drawing various different jewels to test his limits. Geo remembers the process of grinding those precious gems down to turn them into paint and use them in his works. He felt that the paint itself and the painting seemed to come alive, acting as if they were a living creature with each brushstroke full of brilliance and energy. The creation process became something magical. Geo felt that nothing was impossible in there and wanted to test what would happen when interacting with the outside reality. The hunter sees with surprise that the face drawn in the painting is now covered in spots of colorful paint. Geo observes the result carefully, noting that his suspicions were correct. He notes that restrictions exist upon seeing a quest panel that requires a reward for the hunter with a deadline of 6 days. Right after that, a glowing reddish jewel appears on the system screen with a notification sound. The magical, colorful jewel begins to slide smoothly out of the painting's golden frame. Sung-woon catches that glowing object in his hands, which just materialized into the real world. Geo presents the jewel to the hunter, stating it is the promised payment for his previous favor. Sung-woon stares at the object of an unprecedented crystal structure, shocked that Geo created that just by painting. He stares at the jewel intently, asking what type of precious stone that would exactly be. Geo admits he does not know, but reveals it must have been mined from a place so deep that it makes it very hot. The youth says it rested near the planet's core, and that maybe it is hot because it resembles a friend of his. The hunter feels the intense heat of the stone in his hands and comes to a very important conclusion, with the certainty that the portrait is not a monster. The third day of investigations is finalized. The hunter repeats the term about the origin while observing the intense glow of the precious gem. He explains that this is the conclusion he managed to obtain based on his observations up to this point. The origin is a transcendental entity that governs the balance of the universe and creates the rules of existence. It functions as a sort of absolute system, being considered by many to be the god of gods himself. The dungeons that appeared on Earth 30 years ago are dimensions born from the energy of this supreme being. It is from these dungeons that monsters emerge, this being the truth known by the gardeners. The hunter recalls that monsters come from dungeons, whereas the children of the origin are born directly from it. He explains that the two groups differ in nature, but Geo proved to be entirely different from both. The hunter continues the account about Geo, while Bisabeol stares at the precious gem with curiosity. He reveals that Geo managed to create a life form entirely distinct from himself, closing the 6th day of exploration. Back at the gallery, Sung-woon still tries to process Geo's incredible ability to give life to his own creations. Geo introduces the tiny, glowing blue birds as his new family, explaining that he found it fun, and so he created several of them. The magical little birds of blue energy fly happily from one side to the other around the youth. Admired to see the beings flying inside the painting, the hunter asks if there are many, and if Geo really painted all of them alone. Geo confirms he created around 100 of them, and jokes saying they are quite talkative, even though they do not have real vocal cords. He details that sometimes these tiny creatures all gather into a single group to form a beautiful pond in the scenery. The youth shares that they love to dress up by keeping things inside their gelatinous bodies, each with its own unique taste. While listening to Geo's detailed explanation, the hunter becomes extremely pensive and shocked by the magnitude of what he is witnessing. Sung-woon comments that Geo speaks of them as real living beings and questions if the birds possess a soul, a feat that surpasses any monster. The youth in the painting just stares back at the hunter with a calm look and responds in a mysterious tone that he wonders about that too. The hunter knows that the children of the origin do not possess an ego or their own consciousness, being incapable of holding an intelligent dialogue. He analyzes that Geo is a painting and at the same time a human, acting as an extraordinary entity capable of altering physical reality. However, he senses no divine presence coming from the young man, which completely rules out the possibility of him being a god driven by curiosity. Sung-woon questions if Geo could paint a destiny, memories, and even create a real human being. The hunter reflects that if the young man truly possesses this level of supreme power all by himself, he is something completely off the charts. Geo responds that such a feat might be possible or not, but makes it clear that he has the slightest interest or desire to try anything like that. The youth explains that he finds the simple idea of creating a human life disturbing. Considering it way too extraordinary of a task, Geo adds humbly that he himself is not someone so extraordinary to perform a feat of such massive magnitude. The youth in the painting asks with all sincerity for the hunter not to view him as someone superior, saying it is better to avoid that thought. Facing Geo's request, the hunter remains silent for a moment, absorbing the seriousness of those simple words. Sung-woon accepts the imposed condition in a very respectful manner, promising he will keep that important advice in mind. Already back in his boss's room, Sung-woon questions if he truly has no intention of turning the painting over to the association. Bisabiol smiles and responds that, at the current moment, the only thing he can truly understand is the story contained within the painting. The master admits he does not know what skills he has, the real size of his soul, or the role Geo plays in the origin of the world. The hunter ponders that, being an entity of immeasurable impact, the association would be the most suitable to study him for everyone's sake. With an ironic smile on his face, Bisabeol formally calls his curator by his full name to draw his attention back. The guildmaster asks if the hunter has already forgotten the exact request that was made to him the moment he was hired. Bisabeol states with pride that he does not want combat weapons in his collection, making it clear that his only real interest is a masterpiece. He points forward and emphasizes that it was precisely for this aesthetic reason that he founded that entire guild and his own company. Bisabeol says he has pride as an artist, but none as a hunter, reinforcing his peculiar worldview directly to the curator. He states that no real collector expects a masterpiece to serve to ward off evil spirits or bring good dreams. For Bisabeol, the true focus of an art appreciator is simply to unravel and admire the unique story contained within the painting. The master of the Collectors Guild concludes by saying he wishes only to preserve that fascinating story with his own hands. With an immensely intense and bright gaze, Bisabeol questions if the curator does not realize they cannot stop what is to come. Geo's painting remains hanging in the dark gallery, exuding an aura that is at once mysterious and extremely calm. Bisabeol reflects that this force is like a natural disaster that communicates and that luckily holds no bad intentions against them. Inside his own world in the painting, Geo continues to calmly prepare some bread dough near his colorful jewels. The guildmaster considers the meeting with the young man an unbelievable stroke of luck, even calling it an impossible miracle. He says that whatever Geo's nature may be, they cannot afford to foolishly throw away that true miracle. Bisabeol recalls that the moment the painting appeared at the art auction, it was inevitable that it would become known to everyone. Sung-woon then deduces that his boss acted first simply to prevent that from leading to an unforeseen catastrophe in the world. With a confident tone, the guildmaster comments that he can see much more than others imagine about the facts. Bisabeol ponders that if the creature in the painting firmly believes itself to be human, then that is exactly the way they should treat it. Back in the painting, Geo watches in surprise as a small object slips and rolls away on his workbench. One of his glowing, yellowish little creatures lets out a cute little growl while shining intensely in the scenery. Bisabeel advises the curator not to have a closed mind like other hunters and encourages him to think much bigger from now on. Sung-woon agrees with his boss's vision, stating with conviction that Geo is a genuinely good and very kind person. Bisabeel lets out a good laugh and comments that the youth in the painting hates being bothered, but that he never holds any grudge because of it. He reflects that if someone is capable of not holding grudges even when bothered, it shows how kind that person must be. The master concludes that Geo acts with extreme respect and compassion, even fearing harming other people, thus ending the investigation. The hunter is surprised by the fact that Geo is afraid of harming people, thinking that to him, humanity should be as insignificant as ants. Bisabeel reinforces that Geo is someone kind, and Sung-woon questions how he can be so sure without ever having spoken to the young man. Bisabeel boasts, saying that this is the level of perception required to be a guild master, needing nothing more than a single glance. The master advises the hunter not to go snooping into Geo's thoughts so as not to irritate him, just being a good conversation partner. On top of that, Bisabeel suggests in a relaxed manner that the hunter take Geo out for a walk in the fresh air every now and then. Sung-woon stares at the master seriously, asking if he is truly being serious about that unusual idea. Bisabeel just waves his hand very calmly, confirming his intention without any hesitation. The hunter says goodbye, laughing at himself for having worried so much in his role as curator of the Collectors Guild. He decides he will trust the guildmaster and, above all, his impressive power of judgment. He trusts those special eyes of the master that are capable of seeing things that ordinary humans cannot. Bisabeel orders with a large smile that they give Geo the best care and treatment the Collectors Guild can possibly provide. The curator walks back through the illuminated city streets during the Soul Night. Thoughtful about the mission, he smiles, relieved for not having to hand over to the association, a creature of the origin that communicates so fluffily with them. The hunter knows that the research conducted by the Hunter Association is cruel and amounts to physical abuse. After all, Yu Sung-woon already acted in the past performing the important role of gardener. A creature of the origin known as the garden chooses someone to look after it, and the gardener dedicates himself body and soul to this task. Since the garden state affected the difficulty of several dungeons, the gardeners took pride in their work and loved their garden. With that, they developed a deep affection and curiosity for the beings of the origin that formed the base of that special place. While walking, the hunter notices a bungeopang stall and thinks that nowadays it is rare to find this type of street food. The hunter recalls that the youth in the painting had said he liked enjoying a good meal very much. He thinks about the boss's advice on treating Geo as human, if he believes he is one, maintaining the respect generated by this misunderstanding. For this reason, the hunter decides he would like to preserve this misunderstanding for as long as possible. Back at the painting with a bag of hot bungeopang, Sung-woon smiles and asks the young man's age. Geo responds calmly from inside the painting that he is exactly 29 years old. The hunter, who is 33 years old, flashes a joyful and amused smile upon hearing the young man's response. He confesses with surprise that the answer was unexpected, commenting that Geo is quite young. Geo says people usually think he is older, and the hunter stutters an apology, saying he did not mean to offend him. He finds it incredible that an entity so powerful and recognized by Bisabeel is under 30 years old. He thought Geo was younger, and the youth in the portrait takes the opportunity to ask Sung-woon's age. The hunter says he is 33 years old, and Geo comments that he appears quite young for his age. Sung-woon lets out a restrained laugh upon hearing that sincere compliment coming from the youth in the painting. He finds it amusing to be called young by a being of the origin, and Geo suggests he speak informally. The hunter accepts and shifts to speaking casually, handing over the bungeopang as a gift, while thinking about when to take him out for a walk. Time passes quickly, and the investigation of Geo's portrait reaches its 17th day at the gallery. The hunter makes an analogy comparing the origin to a person's body and the garden to their organs. He explains that the garden would be the equivalent of the veins, nails, heart, or the very eyes of that person. Geo finds the stories fascinating, and the hunter confesses he finds the young man in the painting equally fascinating. The hunter shares that looking after a garden is difficult, and that many gardeners perish in this dangerous profession. Geo listens intently and asks if someone always must absolutely become a gardener. He responds that it is not a free choice, and that even being a curator, he cannot cast being a gardener aside. Sung-woon hands over a small bag with the requested seeds, and Geo thanks him as he takes the gift with his hands extending from the canvas. The hunter finds it funny and comments that it is the first time he sees just the young man's hands coming out from inside the portrait. Worried about his partner's safety, Geo asks if a gardener's life is not very difficult. Sungwoon confesses that it is a bit difficult, yes, but guarantees it is a perfectly manageable situation. He reveals that when he closes his eyes, he can visualize a massive mountain range with snow and glaciers. He says the beauty of the place captivates anyone, and that having a garden all to oneself is something wonderful. The youth in the painting listens to the account in silence, showing great interest in the way the hunter views his garden back in his own peaceful world. Gio says he understands perfectly the feelings expressed by the hunter, petting one of his cute yellow little creatures. Gio states he feels exactly the same regarding his world. With a friendly look, the hunter asks with curiosity if the young man truly feels the same way. Yu Sung-woon asks if Gio would like to step out of the painting someday, saying he would be happy to show him the outside world if he wanted to facing the proposal. Gio becomes thoughtful in the middle of his forest and wonders if that would truly be like going on a sightseeing tour. Yu Sung-woon knows that making a proposal directly to a primordial being is something very serious. He recognizes they still do not know what Gio truly is, which makes it impossible to predict how the young man will interact with reality itself. Since they cannot prevent what is to come, the hunter thinks it is best to discover everything beforehand if things are really going to happen. He comments that Gio probably does not know much about the outside world, and insists that the two go out together so he can show him everything. Gio reflects on whether the time has finally come to live in society again, and decides to agree with Yu Sung-woon's suggestion through the painting. Gio makes his decision and asks the hunter when would be the best time for them to take this trip. Meanwhile, the glowing little creature notices the silence and comments adorably that her daddy is very thoughtful right now. Beginning to work the land, Gio confesses in his thoughts that he felt the people of the outside world were quite afraid of him. He ponders that his paintings come to life out there and that his very presence might seem strange and terrifying to ordinary humans. Gio recalls that when people spoke to him, they seemed to stare into the unknown, as if they were viewing each other in different resolutions. Although that feeling of distance had caught him by surprise at the time, he reassures himself, saying it was not a bad thing. Since he already promised to go out with Yu Sung-woon, Gio now wants to find a way to resolve this difference in perception between them. He adjusts his straw hat under the bright sun, focused on finishing his daily chores in the garden of his own world. Looking at the tilled soil, Gio is happy with the result and recalls his grandmother's advice that he who does not work does not eat either. He remembers the friendly image of the old woman encouraging him, which leaves the small yellow bird curious at the young man's sound. Gio smiles at the creature on his hat and says it already does its part just by being cute, so it does not need to worry about a thing. He admits it was a shock to see it evolve to the point of speaking, but being so warm and different from the others, he decides to give it a name. Gio walks back to his cabin holding the glowing little animal and is relieved to see that the little one liked the idea of getting a name. He holds the golden creature affectionately and begins to think about what the perfect nickname for his feathered companion would be. The young man takes on an extremely serious and focused expression while analyzing the little animal from every possible angle. Gio admits his first guess was bad and jokes that Daddy says silly things sometimes, noticing the serious little face the creature made. He then suggests naming it Honey, since its little body has a very bright and sweet yellow color that resembles the food. Seeing that the little animal seemed to like the choice, Gio comments with good humor that it is a very generous companion for accepting the name decided. The young man enters his studio to finish his landscape paintings before finally taking a well-deserved nap. With the brush positioned firmly in his hands, he prepares to put the final touches on his newest artwork. He begins to slide the brush smoothly across the canvas, concentrating all his attention on every detail of the sea waves. Each precise movement of his hands gives more life and motion to the rough waters he portrays masterfully upon the canvas. Suddenly, a floating system notification appears before him, announcing that it is searching for a new compatible dimension. Flashes of a hostile place packed with terrifying monsters appear as if being scanned by the system itself. Right after that, the system's luminous warning changes color and confirms that a new dimension has finally been found successfully. The painting of the rough ocean begins to glow with a magical and intense light, filling the entire studio with a mysterious energy. Unaware of any of this, Gio is already lying comfortably in his bed, enjoying his well-deserved rest after work. Dawn arrives peacefully in the beautiful valley, with small blue creatures floating happily around the calm stream. With the first rays of sun invading the room, the young painter begins to gradually wake up from his deep sleep. He gets a massive fright coming face to face with a blue holographic window floating in the air, asking him to check the notifications. Still half asleep, Gio sits up in bed and complains about being greeted with system warnings. The very first instant he wakes up, the system displays a card with the wave painting he finished the day before, naming the location the Breathing Sea. He observes other floating screens displaying intriguing names like Animal Kingdom and City of the Void. For his other creations, Gio begins to understand the situation and deduces that the system simply gave official names to the landscapes he painted yesterday. He realizes his canvases reveal entire dimensions, but questions if creating worlds like this is something a normal human should be doing. At that instant, little honey flaps its glowing wings and lands in a very docile and affectionate manner directly on its creator's shoulder. With a humorous shrug, Gio gives a thumbs up and concludes that since this whole process is fun, then everything is fine. Petting the little animal, he jokes that the system must have noticed his lack of talent for names and therefore took that task off his hands. Looking closer at the glowing texts, Gio wonders what the terms compatible host and synchronization mean. Curious to understand the details, Gio mentally commands the system to stop stalling and explain the meaning of all that right away. The holographic panel reveals that this feature is a practical method created to help him comprehend unknown dimensions more easily. The system details that among the creatures of that marked dimension, the one that most closely resembles Gio is designated as the compatible host. He reads with surprise that with the host's permission, he will be able to borrow his body and soul to travel through the new dimension. Seeing names like Giovanni and Argio on the list, Gio wonders if the system just picked people who had the syllable Gio in their own name. He murmurs thoughtfully, suspecting that a compatible host selection would not be decided by something so simple. He concludes that if it were just by the name, the system would not use the term compatible. So another much more important condition must exist. Gio supposes the choice occurred by their level of affinity with himself, and finds it all so interesting that he doubts he will ever get bored again. Next, his attention turns to another screen displaying the City of the Void with a warning that this dimension does not yet exist on the map. Seeing the button asking if he wishes to register the location, Gio realizes he might have just ended up creating an entirely new dimension. Smiling at the idea that his life is about to get a lot more exciting, the young painter presses the confirm option without hesitation. He tells Honey that life is fantastic, and, noting the little animal's confused silence, jokes telling it to trust him, because life is a whirlwind. Right after that, a system chime warns about a new tip to resolve the resolution issue that worried him so much. Satisfied with the system's timely help, Gio looks at his little animal and comments that this proves he is heading down the right path. The text of the tip explains directly that to solve this visual compatibility issue, he must make use of Gio himself. Finding that reason more than enough to have some fun, he extends his finger and selects Giovanni's profile on the holographic screen. In the blink of an eye, Gio is transported and appears sitting on a gurney in the middle of an old laboratory flooded by a strong bluish light. Noting that he was tossed there carelessly and that little Honey has vanished, Gio complains ironically about the system's sloppy delivery service. When Gio wonders where he is, the system panel pops up confirming he is successfully connected to Giovanni's mental landscape. Analyzing the bleak environment around him, he observes that this mental landscape looks a lot like the facilities of an old hospital. At that moment, footsteps echo through the room, and a very tall man with long blonde hair and white robes steps through the large wooden door. The newcomer displays a serene face, though with a somewhat melancholy look. While staring at the young visitor in the dark cloak, Gio is quite surprised to notice the details of the mysterious man's face who just entered, letting out a silent exclamation. The young man greets the man timidly, unable to help, but notice that the stranger's face looks extremely similar to his own. With a radiant smile and a glowing aura around him, the man introduces himself amiably as Giovanni, belonging to House Bartlangio, introduces himself. Realizing internally that this blonde man truly is his compatible person, Gio comments that they are indeed very similar, thinking to himself that if he were a foreigner, he would have that exact appearance. Giovanni smiles warmly and adds saying that the two of them probably must share many other similarities beyond physical appearance. Gio shakes his head humbly, stating that unfortunately he is not capable of giving a smile as warm and welcoming as his. He explains that his awkwardness with smiling always caused misunderstandings, making people think he carried some major tragedy. There were even those who whispered imagining he hid a dangerous past, all because of his constant serious expression in the classroom. However, Gio confesses that most of the times he stood with that scowling face, he was just eager for the dinner bell to go eat. Giovanni finds it funny and says it is a cute concern that reminds him of his former students, promising that from then on the young man will manage to smile just like him. Gio reflects on whether such a deep change would truly be possible to happen just through the system's synchronization process. The The young man then approaches the subject with caution. Admitting he thought Giovanni would be losing control of his body and his soul to him, Gio asks if he does not feel fear or resentment, since he is taking everything from him to explore a new dimension, which he considers a robbery. To Gio's surprise, Giovanni responds with extreme calm that this is no robbery, revealing next that he has already met his end. He explains that his soul returned to the sun and his body turned to dust in the earth, but quickly corrects himself, commenting that his body was never actually buried. Giovanni reveals with sadness that all the land of his home ended up completely swallowed and devastated by the waters of the immense ocean. Shocked, Gio asks if his land truly was swallowed, and Giovanni confirms that his world was consumed by the sea and met its end. Gio listens to the account in silence, showing great empathy and respect for the loss of that man who lost everything to the immensity of the water. Gio ponders if that tragedy is not too heavy of a story to tell a stranger, but agrees to keep listening when he asks. Please, Giovanni says only mermaids remain at the bottom of the sea, and that the planet shrank like a board, becoming a dungeon bound to certain rules. Hearing the term dungeon, Gio immediately recalls Yu Sung-woon's explanations about dimensions that emerged after the Great Cataclysm. Giovanni admits it was a new concept for him, but states he understood everything the moment Seo Gio called him. Since both are the same being, the deep connection between their souls intensifies. Reflecting Gio upside down, as if he were looking at the surface of the water, Giovanni makes it clear that they are not the same person, but rather entirely distinct individuals who somehow share a unique bond. He adds that by some sort of miracle of fate, the two ended up born with a truly impressive amount of similarities. The man reveals that from then on, their souls will merge, which could be considered a different form of resurrection or reincarnation. He explains that by merging with Gio, they will live new experiences together, and, in this manner, he will manage to continue existing within the origin itself. Gio repeats the word in a rather intrigued fashion, trying to comprehend what exactly the man meant by mentioning the concept of the origin. Giovanni smiles peacefully and clarifies that, although it seems like a strange concept at first, Gio is already in fact living within this origin. Gio asks if his home is the origin and recalls he heard about this from his new friend, though he knows this name was invented by humans of Earth. He explains that no one knows the origin's true name, let alone the rules or the real form that this mysterious entity possesses. Giovanni smiles lightly and says that being a humble soul, he merely answered the system's call to tune in with him. Giovanni joins his hands timidly and makes a single request that if it is possible, Gio look after the sun god of his former world with care. Gio points to his own chest with his index fingers. Completely surprised by such an unusual request from that priest, Gio panics over being an ordinary human facing such massive responsibility. But the blonde laughs lightly and reveals he also thought that way in life. Giovanni explains that without devotees, a god ends up forgotten, and as a child of the divinity, he cannot help but worry about this. He asks only for Gio to remember the sun god every now and then, and try to chat amicably with him on occasion. In this manner, the young painter will be able to borrow a bit of that divine power to help him during his journey through the dimensions. The Priest of Light guarantees with all the certainty in the world that this task will not represent any kind of heavy burden for the young man. Gio compares the mission to keeping company for lonely seniors. Sharing that he already did this type of volunteer work back in college, Gio asks if there is any other wish. But Giovanni responds jokingly, asking if the request to care for a god would not already be enough of a burden for him. Gio smiles to himself, thinking that for someone who already lived in the mountains of Gangwon-do, pulling smiles from seniors is pure cake. Giovanni displays an expression of pure peace and relief upon realizing his beloved sun god will finally be in good and reliable hands. Suddenly, the priest whispers a female name with deep melancholy, while the image of a mermaid tail appears in their minds. Hearing that whisper so heavy with feelings, Gio repeats the name and asks curiously who this Arya would be. With a serious and saddened look, Giovanni reveals she was his disciple and makes a grim request for Gio to bring a definitive end to her. A terrifying vision of an entire city completely submerged by the darkness of the seafloor is shown in the young man's mind. Gio's consciousness returns abruptly to the safe and peaceful environment of his beautiful wooden cabin surrounded by trees. He opens his eyes and finds little Honey patiently waiting for him on the table, looking very happy with its creator's return. However, Gio is struck by a terrible physical sensation of cold and discomfort that makes him curl up in pain right after in bed. A system screen appears confirming Gio accepted the quest to speak with the sun god and to give a conclusion to the Little Mermaid. Little Honey flaps its golden wings, quite startled upon seeing the expression of sudden suffering stamped on Gio's face. Gio guarantees everything is fine, but his body trembles violently with cold, being dominated by a sharp physical pain that seems to tear his flesh. Feeling all that agony, he wonders whose terrible sensation this would be, while the system shows that the assimilation rate is at 1%. Catching a mental glimpse of Giovanni suffering in the dark, Gio insists bravely that he will endure the pain and that everything is perfectly fine. Gio has a brief glimpse of Giovanni in the past, sitting on the beach of his old home, warmly welcoming two mysterious figures from the waters. The memory shifts sharply to a terrifying and smiling sea creature, displaying very sharp teeth, saying there is nothing wrong. A flood of tears of pain and deep sadness streams from those brilliant blue eyes as the tragic memory continues to play. Even in the midst of that immense pain and tragedy, the image of the priest with long blonde hair returns to smile with extreme peace and sweetness. Through Gio's mind, the priest's calm voice echoes, stating with all the certainty of his soul that he did not regret anything he did, weeping copiously. The man reveals that despite all the suffering of his tragic end, he was immensely happy during his short life. Far away from there, in the real world under the flickering light of a street lamppost at night, someone comments in a serious tone how terrible that entire situation is. A woman in high heels walks down the stone hallway, commenting in an enigmatic manner that there seems to be a bright sun shining in every corner there. The lamppost suddenly shuts off completely, plunging the entire dark street under the silent and mysterious protection of the night sky. The beautiful full moon shines intensely in the clear sky, illuminating from above the large buildings of that city that seems to never truly sleep. In the guild office, fingers full of shiny gold rings begin typing very quickly and rhythmically on a laptop keyboard. Bisabiel rests his hand on his forehead and flashes a rather mischievous side smile, clearly plotting some wild idea in his restless mind. He posts an official notice in the guild protecting Gio and establishing rules for the employees, believing it to be a great preventive measure. With a very focused feline golden gaze, he closes his laptop lid with a sharp snap. Satisfied with the plan he just drew up at the entrance of the imposing guild headquarters, the employees begin commenting in whispers about the strange notification sent out. Groups of hunters and assistants gather in the building's hallways to discuss in a low tone the bizarre content of that new warning. Two guild members check their phones and admit surprised that in all their years of working there, they have never seen such a strange memo. They speculate if the mysterious cloaked figure mentioned in the notice would be the same ghost that had been haunting the basement rumors. Other hunters look at their phone screens intrigued, wondering if this cloaked Gio would be a human or not. Two female employees comment that leader Bisabiol would never make jokes with formal notices, which leaves them confused on how to interpret the memo. A young hunter laughs without caring much, telling his colleagues that the best thing to do is just accept it and not try to understand the notice. After all, it is obvious that this hooded entity is not human in any way, but the master ordered everyone to just play dumb and act normally. At the corner of the hallway, a young assistant with green hair listens to the conversation silently, with an expression of extreme worry on her face. A strong man in a suit reads the notice on his phone with seriousness, while other employees continue passing nervously through the guild's hallways. Letting out a long sigh of exhaustion, he decides to ignore the mystery, knowing that investigating that cloaked matter would only give him more work. Some employees talk among themselves, preferring 1,000 times to go home to rest and walk the dog over having to pull overtime at the guild. Meanwhile, two guards conclude that Master Bisabiol must have realized the mysterious basement ghost is harmless and safe to keep. Adjusting his sunglasses, the guard on duty warns over the radio for everyone to just follow the new rules to avoid any kind of trouble. With a very serious and resigned countenance, he agrees with the instruction, preferring to accept the master's new orders without making major questions. The rest of the office crew also celebrates the fact that they do not have to deal directly with the basement ghost during their shifts. However, some female curators remain quite afraid, remembering they will need to look after Gio's portrait when Yu Sung-woon is away. Seeing the despair of the curators who move away whispering, the guard with glasses thinks to himself that he should buy them dinner to console them. In another room, Yu Sung-woon praises the hired team and comments with the boss that he is highly relieved that everything was resolved in perfect peace. Bisabiol lets out a loud and amused laugh, confessing how much he loves his employees for hating extra work and not caring about anything. He adds that by defining these clear rules to protect Gio from rude attitudes, the guild avoids any kind of friction or trouble with him. Yu Sung-woon crosses his arms with a serious posture, agreeing that this attitude will certainly prevent internal problems within the guild. However, due to Gio's immense magical presence, he warns they need to pretend the young man is an S-rank hunter so as not to scare the public. Bisabiol leans back in his luxurious chair and wonders laughing how the people out there are going to react, seeing an S-rank hunter emerge out of nowhere. He recalls that hunters nowadays are treated like major idols, which will cause the news about the mysterious Gio to spread like wildfire. Countering his boss's ironic tone, Yu Sung-woon faces the situation with seriousness and states he sincerely believes this uproar will be for the best. He explains that an entity's danger level depends on the proportion of the rumors about it, and shrinking Gio's legend to a human level is safer. Bisabiol finds the gardener's theory fascinating and reveals that to prepare, he has already booked an exclusive high-security hotel for tamer hunters. The boss assures with a sinister smile that he will cover up any minor trouble that happens, telling the curator to just guarantee a fun outing for Gio. Yu Sung-woon swallows hard and feels a slight cold sweat trickle down his forehead, hearing his boss's absurd definition of what a tolerable mess would be. Being the one in charge of accompanying Gio, the curator merely prays silently that none of the chaotic scenarios desired by the master come to pass. The metallic elevator doors open with a smooth mechanical slide upon finally arriving at the mysterious and isolated fifth basement of the guild's gallery. Walking out of the elevator, Yu Sung-woon adjusts his black gloves and decides he will need to rely entirely on Gio's good behavior and kindness. Footsteps toward the subterranean room echo clearly through the gallery as the hunter walks toward the location of Gio's portrait. Arriving in the luxurious room, the curator finds Gio already outside of his golden frame. Dressed in his imposing and characteristic long black cloak, Yu Sung-woon stops walking suddenly and lets out a confused exclamation, feeling a strange chill run down his spine facing the young man. Staring at the young painter in the dark cloak with a lot of attention, the hunter notices immediately that his very presence seems somewhat different from before. Gio asks calmly if he made him wait long, and Yu Sung-woon politely denies, responding that actually he himself ended up arriving early. The curator is shocked to notice that even the young man's tone of voice changed, sounding in a completely different manner from what he was used to hearing. He notes that Gio's tone of voice is terrifyingly perfect, and that immense magical pressure generated by the major level difference between them has vanished. Perceiving the shock stamped on the hunter's face, Gio reveals in a very calm manner that he decided to adopt some preventive measures for this outing. The curator repeats the word in a totally confused fashion, trying to guess what kind of magical alteration Gio would have made to change his state. So much, Gio explains that he adjusted himself so as not to scare the humans out there, concluding satisfied that his attempt went very well, seeing his shocked reaction. 2 days after his soul synchronization with the priest Giovanni, Gio wakes up in his bed and says, laughing to little Honey, that his daddy is doing very well. He gently pets Honey's soft and glowing little body with his finger. Feeling an immense affection for the cute golden creature that does not leave his side, Gio ponders on the inner workings of the system, recalling he needs to find a compatible host in the dimensions and obtain his consent. After that, he must advance clearing the quests of the location to increase his soul assimilation rate with the host, concluding the cycle. He notes things go a lot faster when Giovanni's virtuous personality takes control of his actions, but there are some downsides. Even without doing anything, Gio notices his assimilation rate rose to 4% on its own and that he is receiving unprecedented memories. He observes the painting with the priest's memories, confessing in thought that it feels as if he were slowly remembering his own past life. Gio perceives that all of Giovanni's rich emotions and tragic memories are gradually merging and blending into his own mind in a natural manner. He recognizes in Giovanni the soul of a warm man with a gentle charisma, capable of charming everyone, a true leader focused on bringing peace to the world. Above all, the ancient priest was someone simple who highly valued daily companionship with loved ones and the little pleasures of life. Under the glowing image of the noble priest with golden hair appears his full baptismal name that Gio now carries in his soul, Giovanni Batlan. Gio finds it bizarre to feel two minds operating together and says that although the blonde's personality slips out every now and then, it is very simple to reclaim total control. The young man perceives everything is unfolding in an identical manner to the practical advice given by the system to apply compatibility with Gio's persona. He is startled in the middle of his thoughts when his stomach lets out an absurdly loud and indiscreet growl, which startles even little Honey. The young painter discovers that the synchronization makes him have very human needs, like feeling real hunger, needing to sleep, and even having to clean the house. Sitting at the kitchen table savoring his morning meal, Gio smiles relieved upon concluding that all these reactions will make him look like a normal human being, returning to the present in the guild's basement. Gio confesses to Yu Sung-woon that he is quite hungry at the moment and asks in a gentle manner if they can go now. The curator snaps out of his trance of surprise and, nodding hastily, gestures with his hand indicating the path to begin the walk. Yu Sung-woon walks thoughtfully, totally incredulous with the unbelievable situation he just witnessed in the 5th basement. He perceives startled that he had been worrying the whole time about the wrong problems while Gio walks peacefully right behind. The hunter perceives that to avoid crushing the people around with his immense aura, Gio literally reduced his own presence in a voluntary manner. Thinking that this is almost a spiritual self-mutilation, Yu Sung-woon asks tensely if the young man is all right, and Gio responds confused that he is. While the elevator arrives at the lobby, the hunter continues reflecting on the unusual and worrying habit the young painter has of distributing gifts. He knows that if people with bad intentions discover the young man's extreme generosity, Gio will certainly end up becoming a very easy target. Yu Sung-woon perceives that the true danger is not the actions that Gio might take unexpectedly on the street, but rather the world's reaction to him. They pass under the watchful eyes of the guards at the guild entrance, who continue discreetly monitoring the young man's exit from the basement. Yu Sung-woon admits that his biggest mistake was not having prepared better to handle the malice of ordinary humans who might try to provoke Gio. Observing the large futuristic buildings around, Gio comments thoughtfully that things truly change very quickly in the world of the living. He recalls when he briefly peeked outside from inside a box, noting how much more developed the current city is. The young painter analyzes the bustling crowd with curiosity, finding the people walking back and forth much more diverse and unique. Gio finds the view so incredible that his worries vanish, finding it funny to see normal people carrying large swords through the city streets. While walking, they begin to attract the sideways and suspicious glances of hunters passing armed in the opposite direction along the sidewalk. A hunter with wings and his partner carrying a gigantic blue sword also stop to whisper. Intrigued by the presence of the youth in the cloak, Gio perceives he still draws attention even with the lowered status, and the curator notes that his aura still equates to that of an A-rank hunter to avoid further trouble. Yu Sung-woon gently pulls the hood of Gio's cloak back over the young man's head, who accepts the help promptly. The hunter explains they are going to take the futuristic suspended train to go to the restaurant, leaving Gio fascinated with such a modern invention covered by the hood. The young man wonders if the outside world would truly be capable of evolving that much in a period of just 31 years, so that they can pay the fare for the transit. Yu Sung-woon reaches out his hand and hands his gleaming personal card directly to Gio. He explains that Gio can use that card to buy absolutely anything he desires, emphasizing with calmness that it has no limit. Gio stares at the shiny object in his hands and begins to tremble slightly from sheer nervousness, unable to understand why he received a card with no limits. Trembling quite a bit from nervousness, Gio taps the card against the turnstile reader following his friend's calm instruction, hearing a confirmation chime. Already inside the futuristic car with a view of the city, Gio notices the place is quite empty and asks if there is any specific reason for that. While a train announcement chime plays, Yu Sung-woon looks up and responds with calmness that it is nothing very important. The hunter explains simply that the fare for that transit is very expensive for the ordinary citizen. Pulling a silent exclamation from the young man, Gio laments in thought that fares are expensive, and concludes in a rather ironic fashion that capitalism remains very much alive and strong in the world. Looking at the empty car, the young man reflects in silence that social inequality between the rich and poor seems to have gotten even worse in the future. Yu Sung-woon checks his wristwatch and comments that usually there are more people, but since it is already 8:38 in the morning, the situation shifts. He explains that at this hour, all workers are already focused on their jobs, which leaves the transit car even more deserted. Shocked by the time, Gio wonders if he heard right, but the hunter confirms that most companies usually start the workday at 7 in the morning. Outraged by the hours, Gio thinks that human rights have vanished from there, concluding it is much better to live in his painting than to be a slave to work. Looking at the snow falling outside the window, Yu Sung-woon changes the subject in a friendly manner, asking if he remembers the fish-shaped bread Gio promises to return the gift, and the hunter explains that that is street food, saying they can try looking for some stall during the walk. He lists other street delights like egg bread and octopus balls, but Gio falls silent when the hunter asks if he knows what fish cake is. Offended, Gio thinks that his friend sometimes forgets that he used to be a normal human before turning into a spirit bound to that portrait. but he quickly lets it go, grateful for the prestigious treatment that landed him a card with no limits, and confesses with his mouth watering that he really wants to try the sweets. Yu Sung-woon warns him not to raise too many expectations, explaining that the stalls vanished due to complaints that they ruined the city's look. He details the strict prohibitions against street vendors and the harsh consequences, commenting that people from the provinces suffer severe restrictions in the city. Geo finds that information strange and notices there seems to exist an extremely rigid and severe social division between urban residents and those from the interior. The hunter confirms in a somewhat uncomfortable manner that indeed this separation exists, which makes Geo ask curiously the reason for so much division. The hunter admits it is a difficult and complex topic to explain directly, justifying in a simple manner that it is just about the current social climate. He confesses with embarrassment that society divides into castes, explaining that hunters and citizens with good jobs in the capital belong to Class 1. He details that, in general, any hunter of rank B or higher is classified in the elite of Class 1, provided they have never committed serious crimes. The hunter continues revealing that even those humble citizens without large salaries belong to Class 2, simply by the fact of residing within the capital. He reveals that the humble people who live in the provinces farthest from the capital usually are framed in a generic manner in the so-called Class 3. There are also the most needy without records or identities, who live on the borders and end up implicitly labeled in Class 4. Finally, criminals and fugitives fall into the dreaded Class 5, losing their human rights and receiving an automatic death sentence upon being spotted. Geo listens to everything in absolute silence, finding it extremely bizarre and sad that such a rigid caste system has become the standard of that society. Seeing a beautiful traditional restaurant down below, Geo asks, intrigued if a real motive exists to divide the population to this extent. The hunter explains that defense infrastructure is the biggest reason, because you never know when or where a dangerous dungeon might break open. He adds that some monsters not eliminated at the start of the cataclysm ended up adapting and establishing themselves for good across the entire Earth. For this reason, immense defensive walls were erected at the borders of the cities to protect citizens against these aerial attacks. On top of that, the construction materials of the capital are extracted from strong monsters to withstand almost any type of enemy onslaught. There are also guards patrolling all the time, and since many hunters are nearby, any incident that arises is resolved very quickly. However, these security resources are limited, and in the interior, any slip of just 1 second can easily cost your life. As they serve the sliced meat grilling on the table, Yu Sung-woon shares that he chose that restaurant for absolutely not serving monster meat. Geo is shocked to learn that people eat monsters, perceiving that the rules and common sense of that new world are totally inverted. Savoring the meal with his chopsticks, Geo reflects with sadness on how difficult and cruel life on Earth became in a period of just 31 years. Still, he cheers up noticing that traditional bulgogi remains just as tasty as before, being his only consolation in that dystopian world. Strolling along the edge of a beautiful canal of clean waters, Yu Sung-woon comments that they are in winter, but the climate of that location remains quite warm. He reveals that the Department of Urban Landscaping used magic on the waters, so the region works as a greenhouse and keeps the plants green. He says admission there is free for almost everyone, and Geo's attention is captured by a small and exotic bird of fluffy white feathers. Sung-woon picks up the cotton ball bird and explains that that docile creature is one of the monsters that lost all hostility toward humans. Geo is surprised to learn that the creature so cute was once a monster, concluding that certain species evolved to coexist in harmony. The hunter finds very cute the scene of several cotton ball birds landing amicably upon Geo's hood. Noting that the birds adore him, Sung-woon invites Geo to dip his feet in the warm water, and the young man, surprised by such freedom, asks confused if that truly is allowed. The hunter says there is no problem, because the location is deserted at that hour, encouraging Geo to sit down calmly on the stone edge of the canal. Geo dips his bare foot gently into the warm and translucent waters, feeling an extremely pleasant and invigorating physical sensation. He perceives in thought that that warm water possesses a very different and striking aroma, unlike the ordinary and odorless water of the past. Flashing a slight satisfied smile under his hood, Geo comments that it is a very beautiful water, quite clear, crystal clear and deep, feeling a strangely sweet aroma rising from the canal. Yu Sung-woon looks startled at his companion and calls him in a tone of alert. The sweet aroma recalls the sea of Giovanni's devastated land, whose blonde presence and glowing eyes begin to manifest around Geo's body. The canal water begins to churn, and Geo's eyes glow in a greenish tone under the hood as Giovanni's soul takes control. The priest's long blonde hair flows out of the dark hood as he splashes and plays gently with the canal water. The hunter calls him with urgency, while the young man's face reveals a gentle and mysterious smile, completely taken over by Giovanni's consciousness. Facing that drastic and terrifying change in the young man's appearance, the trembling curator asks if he is still the Seo he knows. With extreme calm and a supernatural sweetness in his voice, the entity under the dark hood responds to the hunter that this assumption is correct. Displaying a serene smile under the golden locks, he states with all the confidence in the world that his name indeed is Gio. The curator is left totally paralyzed and terrified with dread, feeling cold sweat trickle down upon perceiving the grandiosity of that other presence. Sometime later, the scene shifts and Yu Sung-woon appears, politely handing over the magnetic card for access to the room of the luxurious hotel. He warns that his room is right next door and arranges to meet at 6 in the evening to go to the reserved dinner, and Gio agrees calmly. Yu Sung-woon forces a friendly smile and says goodbye, wishing a good rest to the young man before closing the wooden door of his room. As soon as he enters the room, the hunter collapses to his knees on the floor, breathless and trembling with dread as panic finally takes over his body. He rethinks the disturbing scene he witnessed at the edge of the canal, having absolute certainty that that other entity definitely was not human. He recalls that the young man had been introducing himself as Seo Gio at the guild, most likely from being aware that he was in South Korea. The curator remembers that upon noticing that sudden shift in his features and voice, he decided to ask on purpose if he was truly Seo Gio. However, instead of using the full Korean name from before, the blonde entity with glowing eyes made sure to identify himself simply as Gio. He rests his hand on the room wall, breathing with much difficulty, trying to process the overwhelming danger that revelation brought. He regrets having lowered his guard just because Gio's power had decreased, knowing that creature can never be a regular human like us. Yu Sung-woon concludes terrified that the young man is, in truth, an overwhelming force of nature itself, merely mimicking human traits, collapsing face down upon the mattress of his bed. The hunter confesses in his thoughts with deep anguish how scary that entire situation is. While the hunter suffers from anxiety and panic next door, the narrative turns to focus on the young painter's actions in his own room. Oblivious to everything, Gio observes dazzled the immense cityscape through the large glass window of the 45th floor. While little Honey grumbles, Gio holds Honey in the palm of his hand and says he is also happy, regretting only not being able to feed it due to having brought the little animal hidden in his suitcase. Lying on his back on the comfortable bed, the young man jokes, saying they will make a delicious sweet with sugar syrup when they return to the forest cabin. The curator tries to calm down, thinking that Gio does not do that out of malice, and that maybe he is just striving to look like a normal and kind human. Staring fixedly at his wristwatch, the hunter sighs tensely and prays with all his heart for this walk to end, without any more frights or mishaps. However, just as he makes this request, Gio reacts again to the proximity of the water nearby the canal, awakening once more Giovanni's soul. Yu Sung-woon screams desperately for Gio's name, while the pilot of the fast speedboat looks back, completely startled. The hunter grabs Gio quickly with strength to prevent the young man from ending up falling or throwing himself into the rough waters caused by the boat. Out of breath, he warns Gio that sudden attitude ended up startling the pilot. While the young man stares back at him with total tranquility, Gio apologizes politely to the pilot, explaining that since he had never seen a water canal of that type, he ended up acting out of curiosity. The curator complains that acting as if he were going to jump from the boat suddenly is dangerous, even with Gio commenting that place also smells like the sea. Yu Sung-woon sighs and says he only acted that way out of concern, receiving a gentle thank you from Gio for having understood the situation. Looking fixedly at the young man with apprehension, the hunter remains attentive to any sign indicating Giovanni's mind took control. He breaks the silence, asking if Gio by chance likes the sea very much, leaving the young man temporarily surprised by that question. The hunter explains that the influence of sea monsters raised the water level on Earth, forcing the creation of canals for the sea flow. Recalling his reaction at the previous canal, the hunter says he just wanted to know if the young man had any special preference for the smell of the sea. Gio thinks for an instant with a serene expression and responds in a simple manner that in truth he has no special preference. However, Gio makes a small pause in his speech, while his eyes begin to get half closed under the protective shadow of his hood. He adds, saying that he thinks he likes it, yes, since Giovanni's presence in his soul seems to like that maritime feeling quite a bit. The hunter gets a tremendous sweat drop on his head, unable to understand what kind of confused response of yes and no that would be. Suddenly, Gio surprises the hunter by asking in a direct manner if there are also mermaids living in the waters of that modern world. The curator is intrigued, noting the young man used the words here too, wondering mentally about the sudden mention of mermaids. The hunter explains that sea monsters emerge sometimes and that certain mystical entities exist that usually take the form of these creatures. He details that in the current world, ancient forms of idol worship, folklore, and religious myths gained unprecedented strength. This happens because the belief and fervent faith of people cause these legends to gain life and materialize as real beings. Gio listens to the account with a deep seriousness, recalling the tragic explanations Giovanni had shared about his own world. The young man in the cloak reflects on the priest's words that his planet had shrunk and transformed into a dungeon with rigid rules. He visualizes the details of Giovanni's pending quest to contact the sun god and to give a final conclusion to the story of the Little Mermaid. The speedboat pilot's voice breaks his deep thoughts, announcing in a polite manner that they finally arrived at the destination. Gio is marveled seeing the restaurant was built inside a deactivated fixed dungeon that has the shape of a giant seashell. Seated at the table, Gio asks the meaning of fixed dungeon, and the hunter perceives he still does not know their different categories. The hunter explains they divide into fixed and mobile, being also categorized into virtual, town, or entrance gateway dungeons. He details that virtual dungeons have no physical boundaries and are activated suddenly when people fulfill certain specific conditions. Gio finds the concept totally unfair and absurd, commenting how terrible it must be to be sucked into a dungeon for going to a shop. The hunter agrees and explains that from being rare and hard to detect, this type of dungeon is one of the current population's greatest fears. Gesturing with his fork toward the restaurant ceiling, he explains that fixed dungeons create an unprecedented magical structure on Earth. He reveals that that giant seashell was a culinary dungeon, conquered when an ordinary chef cooked something that pleased the master of the place. Gio finds the story of the conquest incredibly beautiful and emotional, becoming fascinated with the happy ending the chef achieved. The curator shares that the chef awakened as a hunter and continues actively cooking even at 92 years of age. Shocking Gio Yu Sung-woon explains that awakened people of rank C, or higher age, much slower, making the elder appear to be only 50 years old. Gio laments that surprises do not stop, thinking horrified that having to work actively even at 90 years of age is a true nightmare. The hunter explains that when the terrain of another dimension remains on Earth without its rules after being conquered, they call it a town dungeon. He concludes saying that entrance dungeons emerge out of nowhere as portals to other dimensions, and Gio states he managed to understand everything very well. Smiling in a friendly manner, seeing the conversation flowed well, the hunter asks with interest if Gio liked the food and if the meal was good. With his face lit by Giovanni's gentle charisma, the young man praises the excellent meal, commenting that it made him remember his former disciples. Yu Sung-woon rests his chin on his hand and opens a smile of pure friendliness and affection.
Genuinely happy to see his friend enjoying that moment. He says he is glad to see him so content, but soon gets worried with the whispers from other tables, praying for Gio to disguise his immense presence. Commenting that humans notice others a lot, the hunter suggests leaving there quickly and going straight to Gyeongbokgung Palace, a classic tourist spot. Gio repeats the name of the famous historical palace with curiosity,
feeling a slight nostalgia, recalling his former occupation as a history teacher. He recalls with fondness when he took his former school students to do guided study walks through the historical grounds of the palace. The young man wonders if his former students are doing well in that current world of hunters and responds that he is very eager to visit the place, and I am eager for your like. Smash that like button, comment down below, and let me know if you want the next part.